Thank you. Next, we're going to have a video to play. Arjun Kaplan is going to have a dialogue with Hugh, CEO of ASTRI, about global views on acceleration in digitalization.
So Hugh, what are some of the big digitization trends you're seeing as a result of the pandemic?
One of the things that we have done is to take advantage of 5G to use low latency and high throughput to enable some of the maintenance work, some of the field work to be done remotely. And I think that's not just driving efficiency, but it's keeping us safe. And when it comes to 5G, we are actually the only voting members representing Hong Kong, so we're very proud of that at ASTRI here.
One of the things that we have seen, economies have been hurt, of course, quite badly as a result of this pandemic. What kind of role could technology play in helping revive economies as we go forward and eventually move past this?
When there's a challenge, there's always an opportunity. And ASTRI specifically, we like to step up to solve pain point for the society. Now, one of the things I want to point out is just one small example. SMEs are perhaps those that are hit hardest during this pandemic and the economy slowdown that comes with it. We have worked with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. In fact, a white paper just published this week that we co-author with them that will allow a platform that will accelerate lending through auxiliary credit assessment, rather, using AI and big data. So I think that's just one of the many things that we can do to help, not necessarily handing out bad loans, but handing out good loans, but faster.
Here in China, we've seen very quick adoption of 5G rollout pretty fast. Meanwhile, in other areas of the world, the rollout's been sort of slightly slower, and perhaps the devices haven't caught up as well. I mean, when it comes to the consumer's perspective, is 5G enough? The promise of 5G enough to get them to upgrade sort of in the next year or two to new devices, given, I'd say, a lot of what they can do now could be done pretty sufficiently on current existing 4G networks?
When it comes to 5G, it's really not just consumer. I think the changes you're going to see because of the low latency and the high bandwidth are going to be among smart cities. When you have thousands and millions and sometimes billions of sensors in the city. Now, they are there for good use. For example, we have the CV2X. That is a cellular to everything technology that allow vehicle to connect with all the surroundings, all the infrastructures that makes traffic safer and smoother. And when you have all these sensors, they need to be connected. That's when you need 5G.
Now, these are massive infrastructure projects as well. You mentioned, millions of sensors around a city. These don't just happen sort of overnight. And what kind of timelines are we talking about realistically when we talk about smart cities?
Well, exactly right. I think, we're going to see a lot of the investments that's going to be not made by necessary operators who's going to look at the dollar and cents first. And they're going to be asking questions of, where's the use case? And sometimes they would even make fun and saying that, we have a solution without a problem. All right. So, I think with some humor behind it. Yes, it will be adopted by city and governments and infrastructure first. And that's why, Hong Kong is pushing really hard on the smart city initiatives. And you also see some of the governments a little more progressive. And I think that eventually we will see a wider and wider adoption. It really takes a government determination to get that enabled as an infrastructure first, and then let the citizens and the businesses take advantage of that.
Hugh, I want to switch focus to another very important technology that's really been brought into the fore this year, and that's really around semiconductors. This is a technology that's caught between the political crosswinds between China and the US. It's a technology that's had a lot of focus from the Chinese government this year. In terms of semiconductors, what are some of the work you're doing at ASTRI in that field?
Semiconductor is a big space. What we specialize in is in the new material, what you would call the third generation semiconductors. We obviously over the last 2 or so years has been witnessing heightened tension between U.S. and China, and one of the big topics is about semiconductors. But we like to believe this, is that, technology isn't going to stop. I think that it hasn't stopped over the last 50 years. It will not stop because of some of the temporary tensions between the two largest nations in the world. What we like to focus on is what the opportunities are going to be. We talk about renewable energy sustainability a great deal. And saving energy is a big topic. In fact, even just switching from fossil fuel to electricity isn't necessarily the greenest thing to do. What we need to do is to reduce the amount of energy is being consumed. The technology that I talked about, this third generation semiconductor we talked about, will do exactly that. It will cut losses by up to 3 times. Where you're going to find them useful? When you have subway and metro and high-speed trains, we're generating all the braking energy. That's going to be key. In terms of electricity grid distributions, when you have more and more demand, not just in the city, but around the city, cutting down the conversion loss is going to be key. We like to do meaningful things that's impactful to the society, and that's really what ASTRI role is. And you're right, Arjun, the attention is definitely there, and we're going to continue to work with it.
China has very much looked towards pushing a bit more of an independence when it comes to semiconductors, perhaps weaning itself off some of the reliance on American technology. I mean, how does that play out over the coming years?
Well, I think, policy is something that's out of the realm of ASTRI. We obviously a big supporter of bilateral relationships. We believe that it's not a zero-sum game. We believe that countries and companies and cities and everyone should work together instead of working against one another. I can certainly understand why the Chinese government have that policy. We'll continue to support that. At the same time, we'll continue to support any of the bilateral relationships that's going to improve collaborations.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time here. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Arjun, for having me.